Thanks everyone for joining us. My name is Trish Ward and I am the Director of Learning and Development with Microbiome Labs. And I am here with yours truly, Karan Krishnan, who is going to answer questions for us on BiomeFX. So Karan, I am happy to see you.
Hi, Trish. Good to see you as well. I'm sorry you're suffering in the cold of California, but I have very little sympathy for you because it's freezing outside in Chicago.
Truly freezing there. Yes, I am California spoiled. So thank you.
Yeah.
I would love to just dive into it. Let's answer some questions that our practitioners have on BiomeFX.
Yeah.
First and foremost, why did you even want to develop this test?
Yeah. I've said this in interviews before. I've reluctantly developed this test, right? To be completely honest, and I think if you watch a lot of my interviews over the last few years, I've not been a fan of stool tests. And for the most part, I'm not a huge fan of them now, even considering how they're being done for the most part, right? So what we wanted to do was take something that exists that people were using really frequently, and in our view, using in the wrong way, and give them an improved version of it that may actually benefit in terms of understanding the big picture. So let me give you my first experience with stool tests and why, in my mind, I just kind of wrote it off for a while. When we were doing our first leaky gut study, we started designing the study back in 2015. So this is now almost 5 years ago. And when we were looking at all the different parameters that we wanted to study, of course, we were doing LPS and all these inflammatory markers. We said, why don't we do stool as well to see that, number one, it might give us a clue with all the people that we're screening who had leaky gut, comparing them to people that didn't have leaky gut. Maybe we get a clue as to what's different about their microbiome that may be correlated with having leaky gut. So that would be cool in itself. Then second, if we are resolving leaky gut, maybe we will see a change in the microbiome that we can then attribute to being like the pathophysiology that leads to fixing leaky gut. So we said that could be really cool. So let's do stool. Then we started looking at all the tests on the market at that time, and it's all the same stuff that's on the market right now. And we started testing them, right? So what we did is we took a few people, we took 3 or 4 people with each test group, with each type of test, and we gave them all the same stool test like 3, 4, 5 days in a row. We had them, each individual, take the stool test repeatedly, and then we sent all of the data that came, we blinded the data and sent it to a biostatistician. And we asked the biostatistician to match the data to the person, right? So the idea there is that if the tests were consistent, if the tests were accurate, then, if you're an individual, you, Trish, you took the same stool test 3, 4 days in a row, they should be able to distinguish your 3 or 4 results from my 3 or 4 results, right? They weren't able to distinguish anything. Things were completely random. And the biostatistician was basically scratching his head and going, I can't make sense of any of these data points, any of these results. So right off the bat, we dug into the idea of why is this so inconsistent? So we started looking at how stool tests are done, how is sampling of the stool being done, what kind of sequencing technology they're using, how are they reporting the data, is their process of taking sequencing data that's a huge data set and then analyzing it into usable information, is that a validated system? Have they published with it? And so on. We basically came to find out that none of it is useful. It's really low accuracy. It's not repeatable. The data day to day comes out all over the place. And so we basically wrote it off. And for the next, 10, 15 studies that we did not include any stool testing in any of them. And in working with the researchers that we work with who are microbiome experts, most of them did not use stool testing in those studies as well, because it's just not consistent. So we basically wrote it off. And then I started getting all of these messages from our numerous doctor and practitioner clients, and of course just random people on social media with their stool tests going, what does this mean? They would send me a test and it'd have an arbitrary high of one particular pathogen, and they would go, what does that mean? How do I kill that one pathogen? And I'm go, well, it doesn't really mean much of anything, and we don't know if that's even accurate. And if you took the test tomorrow, we don't know if the data will look the same. And how do you go and kill one pathogen? There's no such thing. There's no silver bullet for all of that. So it just kind of, and a lot of practitioners were using the stool test as like an absolute diagnostic tool when it's not. So the accuracy is really low. The consistency is really low. The information they're giving you is kind of arbitrary. It doesn't really denote function of the microbiome. So our position was, kind of stop using them. They're not really giving you any direction to figure out what was wrong with the microbiome. And over the years, we come to find out that people continue to use them more and more and more, right? And we continue to get more and more questions about the results of these stool tests. So then the position became, okay, our job as a company that we boldly call ourselves Microbiome Labs, we want to and are trying to be the key opinion leader in this microbiome space, right? We are investing a ton in research in the microbiome space. We partner with all the top minds in this area. Here are people spending hard-earned money counting on microbiome stool testing, and they're not really getting anything out of it. And they're using really old, outdated technology. The accuracy is poor. The results are getting me nothing. And then we said, okay, if people are going to continue doing these tests, can we give them something that actually can be useful? And so that's where we came about with this. It took us a year and a half of really focusing on this with the best people in this space to come out with a test that we think is at least going to be useful as part of the puzzle to figure out what may be going wrong with your microbiome. So that's kind of the history, the brief version, because I could talk much longer than that. But that's the brief version of why we really did not like stool tests to begin with. Why we saw the need to, okay, let's produce one ourselves. Let's try to give our practitioners, the patients that count on them, the best possible tool that exists today. There's still lots of limitations to stool tests. There's a lot of things it can't tell you, but if it's done right, it can be a useful piece of the puzzle.